אז שוב, שלום לכולם. אנחנו מתחילים פה באיחור 2 דקות כדי לתת צ'אנס לעוד אנשים להצטרף, אבל אנחנו פשוט ניתן להם להמשיך להצטרף ככל שנתחיל בשידור. איך צריכים להתחיל? אני אתן לכם כמה פרטים בעברית, ואחר כך אני אעביר את השרביט למרק שידבר באנגלית. אז אני ממש ככה אסביר בקצרה למי שלא מכיר אותנו, קודם כל, וגם למי שמכיר אותנו, ברוכים הבאים לעוד וובינר של Science Abroad. אז אם אתם לא יודעים, אלה וובינרים שהם חלק מהפעילות הרחבה יותר שאנחנו מפעילים, שמנסה לחבר בין מדענים ישראלים בחו"ל ובישראל, ונעשית בתמיכת המרכז לקליטה במדע והאגף לעידוד יזמות עסקית של משרד העלייה והקליטה. אז כל הפרטים על הפעילות שלנו נמצאים באתר, ואם יש לכם רצון לקרוא אותם, אתם ממש מוזמנים להיכנס ללינק שאני כבר אשאיר לכם מתחת לוידאו, וככה תוכלו להצטרף לפעילות שלנו במרכזים השונים בקמפוסים ברחבי העולם. חוץ מזה, אני רוצה לספר לכם שהוובינר הזה, בניגוד לוובינרים אחרים שלנו, לא הולך להיות זמין לכם להרבה זמן אונליין, ככה שמי שרוצה לראות אחרי זה, להשלים איזה פרטים שהוא פספס דרך ההקלטה, אני מציעה לעשות את זה ממש בימים הקרובים, לפני שנוריד אותו וכבר לא תוכלו לראות אותו יותר. עכשיו אני הולכת להציג את מרק, אז אני עוברת לאנגלית ברשותכם. So today we're very pleased to be here with Mark Spatz. Mark is working as a negotiation skills coach. He is a specialist in human resources, leadership development, organizational change, and has worked with a multitude of industries, from logistics to manufacturing and FMCG to hospitality, airlines, as well as oil and gas. So without further ado, Mark, you are very welcome to put your presentation up.
Thank you, Ronnie.
You're very welcome.
Okay, let's begin. I hope everybody can see my screen now. Ronnie, can you share my screen? Can you see my screen?
Let me check. I think now people should be able to see it. Yeah, it's on. It's on.
Great. Okay. So thank you very much for joining me. It's evening in Melbourne. It's now 8 p.m., 5 after 8. So thank you very much. In the US, much earlier. In Israel, again, another time change. So we're going to discuss this evening negotiation, fundamentals, and some challenges for you. So bruchim habayim, shalom lekulam. And before I begin, I want to thank Ronnie for introducing me. And I want to thank, most of all, Yoni Sharon, who I had the pleasure of teaching about 9 months ago, just before COVID, when he was a participant on a course that we ran at Monash University. And from that, Yoni and I discussed assisting with this program. So it's my pleasure to do so. Let's begin. And by the way, while the presentation will be online for a short period of time, you should feel free to contact me with any questions you have going forward post this presentation. It'd be my pleasure to respond. So let's commence if we can. Here we go. So I want to talk just very briefly about some confidentiality. It's a condition of the participation in this workshop that we request that you don't record, copy, share, post, or otherwise make these materials available to others, please. And it's only for your personal consideration. And if you participate and access the materials post-workshop online on your website, then we're going to assume that you agree to those terms. Now let's just move on. The tagline of the Alchemy of Negotiation is negotiations partners tagline, but much more importantly, what are we going to discuss this evening? Some core principles as they relate to negotiation, 6 core principles. We're going to talk about negotiation as a universal process. Negotiation is a process. Of course, you need to adjust how you negotiate to the context and culture within which you live or work, but the process is the same. We're going to talk a little bit about tactics, not much. We don't have time to do so. And we're going to talk a little bit about style. And by style, I mean, are you assertive, competitive, or collaborative and cooperative? Only you have control over that and deciding how you're going to behave at the table or online or across emails when you are negotiating is dependent on you and will be dependent on the context that you find yourself in. Those elements all contribute to the skill you bring to your negotiations. The skill you bring to your negotiations enhance the confidence you feel and the control you display during the negotiation process. And all that is to achieve better outcomes. And that's what we're after, better outcomes. Not more for you is less for me, or more for me is less for you. Better outcomes for both parties. Mutual gain. Some people call it win-win. We call it mutual gain. It's about growing the pie, growing what's possible for the parties that are negotiating at the table. Now, what's negotiation? Well, we're going to talk about that in a moment, but in our investigations over the 20 years I've been doing this work, it's our estimate that 93%, a large, significant majority of executives and managers we work with actually struggle to explain what it is they do and what negotiation actually means, to define it. Typically, people define negotiations as a discussion. Yes, that informs your negotiation, but it's not a negotiation. They talk about reaching outcomes. Yes, that's true. That's an objective, but that's not a negotiation. We'll define it in a few moments. So some principles. We're going to talk about what is negotiation, giving you a definition. When should you negotiate? Where does the negotiation happen? And I don't mean the place. I'm talking about where it happens, pardon me, in what you're trying to accomplish. And I'll explain more about that. And the why we negotiate and how we negotiate. Who is negotiating? I'm not going to attend to this evening. I'll leave that for questions if you like, but it's not something we're going to engage with this evening. So why do you negotiate? Well, there's a conflict. We're not talking about an armed conflict. We're not talking about fisticuffs. We're talking about me having a way forward and you having an alternative way forward. We have a disagreement. Now, a bit of a story. I travel a lot for work. I'm away from home quite often, delivering programs. Several years ago, I was away for 3 evenings. I came home, and during that stage, I had young children. And when the taxi dropped me off at my home, we had grass in front of the house. There were children's toys to trip over. My key actually worked in the door, so I knew I was welcomed home. And for the sake of the example, there was a landline, a telephone, not a mobile, that was ringing, but the landline was ringing just near the front door entrance. I picked it up, and on the other end of that phone was my best friend with an offer. And the offer came straight from heaven. It was one ticket to an event I was dying to go to. One ticket only, but not any ticket. It was reserved seats, a corporate box to an event I couldn't go to. but I had been away from home for several days. So I said to my friend, look, I haven't been home for a while. I'll come back to you with my response, but I'm going. And he said to me, Mark, unless you're back with a response by tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I'll have to give the ticket to someone else. I said, okay, I understand. So I went to find my partner, kiss and a hug. And she said to me, who was that on the phone? And I told her my great news. And she said to me and surprised me, you deserve to go. You've been working so hard. When is it? I said, that's the best news. It's next weekend. I don't have to wait very long. And then there was a pause. And she said to me, you've forgotten. Forgotten, darling? Yes. And when your partner of several years says you've forgotten something and you don't know what you've forgotten, clearly you have a problem. Yes, you promised to host my mother's 80th birthday in the gardens with 8 of her best friends. Now, the conflict wasn't between me and my mother-in-law. It was between me and my partner about whether or not I would attend this favorite event, this event that I was offered, this once-in-a-lifetime event, or I would host my mother-in-law's birthday celebration. So there are several ways to resolve this conflict. And normally I would engage with you as my audience, but I'll have to engage in another way. And I said to her, look, darling, if you allow me to go, we've been planning on buying a weekender down on the coast. I'll be rubbing shoulders with my best clients. This will make a huge difference to our income. We'll be able to afford that weekender. So I was trying to persuade. Typically, as a salesman, that's what I was trying to do. And it sounded great to me, but it didn't sound great to her. But I thought, well, maybe I could persuade her, but it wasn't working. A friend of mine, when I told him this story, said, why don't you get another ticket and take your mother-in-law with you? And by the way, this was to the Grand Prix, which runs in Melbourne. Now, it made several assumptions. One, that my mother-in-law loved cars. She was a petrol head, as we would say in Australia, which she wasn't. Two, I wanted to push her around in our Zimmer frame for 3 days. And three, she wouldn't cramp my style. None of that was true. None of that was true. It was a technical solution that wasn't going to work. All she wanted me to do was mow her lawn, paint, have a cup of tea with her. You see, our problems were different. I wanted to go to the Grand Prix, and she wanted me to help her around her house. Problem solving works when both parties see the problem through the same lens. But if your view of the problem is different than mine, then problem solving is not going to resolve the conflict. Now, somebody said to me, why don't you just go and impose your will? Now, there is a dilemma with that, because the next time I come home, my key won't work in the door. And by the time I find my way into the kitchen, there'll be a sign on the refrigerator. Your dinner is in the dog. So what happens when you impose your will? You damage your relationship, but sometimes you have to. When there's a contract that's signed, sometimes if you want to get compliance, you will impose your will, but you'd only do it if you had no other choice, where the outcome was more important than a relationship. Somebody said to me, why don't you just host as you promised? That's called giving in. Just concede. And there is an expression in Australia, and it's called putting brownie points in the bank, just giving in. The problem with doing that is getting those brownie points out of the bank. And my spouse, my partner, is going to expect me to give in again and again and again. Giving in happens where the relationship is more important than the outcome. The problem when you do it commercially is it's habit forming, and you've trained the other party to expect you giving in. Well, somebody said, look, why don't you just postpone? Now, I couldn't postpone the event of the Grand Prix. That wasn't going to happen. But I could have possibly postponed the party. And I'm sure we've all received emails or angry phone calls where we would have preferred not to deal with the issue, but postpone it in hope that the conflict would go away. But it doesn't. The heat comes out, the emotion comes out of the conflict, but the conflict doesn't go away. So postponing a conflict doesn't make it go away. However, there are times when you do postpone that power moves in your direction. So sometimes people postpone a negotiation if they think power might move in their direction. Look, my partner said to me, look, could you be there at 1 p.m.? The event, the Grand Prix only started at 1. I said, it's impossible. I'll be there at 5. She said, these are old people. It's going to be outside. They'll get pneumonia. Could you be there at 1:30? I said, you're not listening. 4:30, 2 o'clock. I said, no, that's not going to work. 3:30. And back and forth we went until the distance between us in the arrangement of time was really close. And when you're really close to one another, typically you might hear, well, let's compromise and split the difference. Well, that's called a haggle. Why is it a haggle? There's only one thing on the table. In this case, it's time. Typically, a haggle happens commercially around cash. More for you is less for the other party. More for the other party is less for you. Neither party actually gets what they want. It's kind of like two dogs fighting over a single bone. More for one dog is less for the other. More for the other dog is less for this dog on my right. Both dogs actually want the entire bone. Now, while haggling is appropriate in the souk or shuk in Marrakesh or Cairo or Jerusalem, or in the markets of Bali or the Jade Market in Hong Kong, it truly is not the best way to resolve a commercial conflict. Neither party actually gets what they want. I came up with a solution. I said, let's go to my next door neighbor, our next door neighbor. You tell your side of the story, and I'll tell her mine, and she'll decide. And her decision is binding. In Australia, we call that arbitration. It's not mediation, that's voluntary. The problem with arbitration, which typically happens in large contractual agreements, is that the decision of the arbitrator is binding on both parties and you lose complete control. So I decided to say to my partner, look, take your mom and 5 of her friends to one of the best restaurants in Melbourne, the Flower Drum, one of the finest Chinese restaurants in Melbourne. Have wine from the cellar. Afterwards, take mom out buy her dress. And I know you've been talking about a Raymond Wheel watch that you've wanted for your next birthday. Buy it now. And you could say you're bribing her. Well, it's an ethical program. Yes, I'm throwing cash at this. But cash in this case is low cost to me, but high value to my spouse. What does she get? Lunch with her mom and 5 friends at one of Melbourne's best Chinese restaurants. Her mom gets a dress, she gets a watch. And what do I get? A once in a lifetime attendance at the Grand Prix. And once in a lifetime, because the following year, the person that invited me no longer had access to the Grand Prix. Why is it a negotiation? Because we're trading in differential value. Negotiation is trading in areas of low cost to you, high value to the other party, in order to get back from them things that are low cost to them, high value to you. All the other areas or examples of resolution of conflict all have a cost associated with them. And typically you'd see them all during a negotiation because people would start to persuade. Why? It's cheap. And if I can convince you that I'm right and you're wrong, we're done. If that doesn't work, you'd move to problem solving. If that doesn't work, we might postpone and kick the can down the road a while. But the problem doesn't go away. Well, we don't want you to just give in or oppose your will. What we'd like you to do is begin to trade. In order to trade, you have to understand what people value. So let me show you these different areas of resolving conflict. There's 9 in the list. And now I've shown you a 9-box diagram. The bottom axis deals with increasing cooperation. The vertical axis deals with increasing assertiveness. The bottom axis deals with the importance of the relationship, where you're giving, conceding. The vertical axis deals with the importance of the outcome, where you're taking. So avoiding is neither giving or taking. Conceding is all give. You're not taking anything. You're not receiving anything. And this would happen where the relationship outweighs the importance of anything else. Imposing your will, very assertive, even competitive, all take, no give. The relationship for you in this case is not important at all. Compromise, a bit of both. Neither party actually gets what they want. Persuasion, well, you need a bit of a relationship there, but basically you're trying to take. Problem solving depends on cooperation, where both parties are looking through the same lens. Negotiation, you give to get. You give in order to receive. You give in order to receive. You're trading. Negotiation is all about trading in areas of differential value, referring, well, you're referring up the line, and you might do that because that's a form of postponement. You might refer to a more senior manager or an external party. Or in a family situation, you might request a colleague or a son or daughter or your spouse or partner to do something for you. You're dependent on the relationship. So 9 ways to resolve conflict. Neither good or bad, just different. Where we're going to focus our attention tonight, and I'm referring to Melbourne time, of course, is in negotiation. Please remember, negotiation is not just about discussion. It is not just about giving. It's about trading, trading in differential value. And in order to do that, one of the qualities, one of the characteristics of great negotiators is the characteristic of curiosity. Great negotiators are curious, seeking to understand what the other party wants, what their needs and worries are. When should we negotiate? Well, clearly when we want a better outcome, a better deal on an automobile, on a commercial outcome, on a house. We just want a better deal. It's appropriate to negotiate. When there's a problem, when you're not happy, it's appropriate to negotiate. When you have a complaint, you could just complain, you'll get nothing, you'll get an apology. When I have a grievance, I ask for something in return. When people make demands on you, and I'm assuming people make demands on you all the time, you'd put a condition on those demands. Now we're trading on those demands. When a party says no. No, for a negotiator, is the beginning of the game, not the end of the game. A short story. I have 2 daughters. When my eldest got her license, she said to me, "Dad, I'd like to borrow your car and take 3 of my friends to an end-of-year event, which is a 2-day drive. It's called Schoolies." What do you think I said? I said no. And she said, "Dad, under what circumstances would you let me take the car? Are there any circumstances? Just suppose I telephoned you every 200 kilometers and let you know I was okay. Just suppose I put petrol in the car for the next 6 months. Just suppose when I came home from Schoolies on Friday nights, I'd come home no later than midnight." For her, my no wasn't "I'd rather die in a ditch than allow her to drive the car." She had to find the circumstances where I would allow her to drive the car. So when somebody says no to you, to a proposal you're making, you wouldn't just walk away and fold your cards. You'd say, "Help me understand. What is it about my proposal you do like? Are there any aspects you like? What is it I need to do to my proposal to get you to accept it? Are there any circumstances you could accept it?" And so forth and so on. No is the beginning of the game. And when nothing else has worked, you should be negotiating. When persuasion's not working, when problem solving is not working, when postponing is not working, you should be negotiating to get better outcomes. Okay, so why do we negotiate? Well, we want something. That's why we negotiate. That's why somebody else is negotiating with us. They want something. And while wants are important, understanding the other party's needs and worries is essential. Absolutely essential. Sure, wants are important, but their needs and worries are what drive their presence at the table, seeking to negotiate an outcome with you. And therefore, you need to understand it. In fact, you should be asking yourself, in anticipation of a negotiation, during your preparation for negotiation, what is it I have that they want? What is it I could do to them that they might want to avoid? What is it they have that I want? And what might they do to me that I want to avoid? Why do we want to talk about those things? Because those things surface the power balance between the 2 parties. Needs and worries equal power. Now, power is an interesting phenomenon because it ebbs and flows. Just in this last year, we've had a great example of it. The travel industry, it's on its knees. Airlines, on their knees. Hotels, on their knees. Struggling. Retailers, bricks and mortar retailers, struggling. shopping centers struggling, online retail powering ahead, Amazon powering ahead, cinemas struggling, Netflix and the Israeli equivalent or any other online streaming service powering ahead, growing in leaps and bounds. Why? Because power ebbs and flows. The dollar, the US dollar, it ebbs and flows. It's not anything we have control over. The stock market ebbs and flows. So power is dynamic. And as you negotiate, you need to understand the power balance between yourself and the party you're negotiating with. In fact, I'd say something even further. Before you negotiate, you need to understand all your sources of power. You shouldn't be sitting down and negotiating with anybody before you understand all your sources of power and how and if you will use and disclose them, because they are essential to you getting or achieving better outcomes. So let's have a look. You have something they want. We call that incentives, of course. Something that they might want to avoid are sanctions. Clearly, incentives and sanctions are two parts of your power. Of course, the other party has the same, has exactly the same. I work with merchandising people. I just finished a program today. They're buying. That's their incentive. They can range products, SKUs they're called, SKUs, or they can decide not to purchase those. If there's a sole supplier and they can't get that product from anybody else, well, that's a possible sanction not to supply that. The incentive is they supply, the seller supplies it at a better price for volume. Alternatives, and I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about alternatives. Alternatives to what you are or who you're negotiating with enhances your power and time. If time adds value, the passage of time adds value, you need to think about using it. If the other party is delaying a negotiation, you must ask yourself, why? Are they trying to enhance their power? Time can also be used to mitigate risk. Running a pilot for a set period of time, establishing a baseline. And once you do that, then you can begin to investigate how you move forward. But time allows you to mitigate risk. So now we're looking at the power balance between the two parties. Now, let's talk about alternatives. In the jargon, this is often referred to as a BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. We just call it alternatives. So you have a deal you're negotiating, but your alternative is weak. It's not a strong alternative. Well, you're now playing a weak hand. You need to investigate and find alternatives. In fact, I would suggest to you to find two alternatives at a minimum, because now you've strengthened your position. And I would disclose your alternatives to the other party to structure their expectations, to lower their expectations, for them to know that you have an alternative. Sometimes your alternative will be a better option than the deal you're negotiating. That is a very strong position because you have a walkaway position that is very attractive. So please always think about improving your alternatives to the deal you are engaged with, because that enhances your confidence, that lowers the expectations of the other party, and it gives you choice. Choice enhances your power. Okay. Please understand what the other party's alternatives are, how good they are. Do they have somebody else to do a better deal with? Do they have a strong walkaway position or not? Okay. People underestimate their power. It's a pity. It's a pity. You wouldn't be at the table if people didn't want to do business with you. You only have power if it's disclosed. I'm not suggesting that you beat somebody up with your power. You get out your cricket bat and hit him over the head, or your Louisville Slugger, a baseball bat, and smash him with it. No, you would do it in a nuanced fashion. It's how you present your power that enhances it and allows the other party to recognize it. So first and foremost, discover all your sources of power, all your incentives, all your sanctions, your alternatives, and how you might or might not use time. Please be aware of their power as well. Try to enhance your power by understanding the other party's power, as well as increasing your alternatives and not allowing time to be your enemy. And as they recognize your power, you will raise their appreciation of your power, and you'll have a stronger position at the table, and it neutralizes their power. Now, where do we negotiate? That was one of the questions. An optimum position is an ambit claim. Think of it as an ambit claim. It's something I'd really like. Your exit position is your walkaway. So you might say, well, where should you open the negotiation? If you anchor your negotiation at your optimum or your ambit position, and it's way outside this area in pink, which is the common ground, which is where the deal can be done, because the common ground is defined by the two parties' exit position, not by their optimum positions. So if you anchor the negotiation at a place way outside the exit position, you're going to have to make a series of unconditional concessions to get back into the area of common ground. That erodes your credibility. That means you haven't investigated the marketplace, or it does mean you're a haggler. So you've changed the perception of the other party and how they see you. And you've also made a series of unconditional concessions to get back into the area where it's possible to negotiate. It's much better to anchor the negotiation at the other party's exit position. But you'd say to me, how do I know that? Well, you don't. But you do know the marketplace. So in order to do that, you'd make a series of proposals that move you or move the negotiation towards the other party's exit position. Each of those proposals, giving you a better overall outcome. In the bottom diagram, there's no common ground. You have to ask yourself, if there's no common ground, is this a must achieve? Is this a deal breaker? If it is, it means it's a walkaway. Is there something I could do to close the gap? That's another question you might ask, because your negotiations won't be about a single item. They'll be about dealing with multiple items: price, payment terms, service level agreements, risk, quality, schedule. All those things you'll be negotiating, and all those things will have areas of common ground. When you find an area where there is no common ground, you must ask yourself, is this a must achieve? Please do not save the most difficult item to negotiate for last and find out there's no common ground. Deal with the difficult issues early. Surface them early. Find out if there's common ground between you and your counterparty around that issue. Otherwise, you will have wasted a lot of time negotiating smaller items, and when you come to a big item, there'll be nothing else to be done because there's no common ground. Now, the negotiation process. And we talked about a process for negotiation partners. There are 4 phases. Preparation. What is it I want? What is it I want to achieve? What does the other party want to achieve? I'm making some assumptions here as well. I test those assumptions when I meet with the other party in the explore phase. I could meet with them person to person online, over emails, but I'm testing my assumptions. Once I test those assumptions, I'm going to return to revisit my preparation and correct it, change it, adjust it for what I learned in the explore phase. Once I've done that, I'm ready to put my solution on the table. We call that, and so should you, a proposal. A proposal is your solution to the game. Sometimes your proposal will be accepted, but it's unlikely that the first one will be accepted. You'll find out why it's not, and you'll go back to the explore phase, asking questions about why it is and why it isn't, and you'll have to prepare again. And of course, at the end of a negotiation, you're going to have to listen closely for closing signals, which are questions about minor items, and then ensure you've agreed what's agreed. That's the process. That last phase is critical. It's a small phase. But I know each of you that negotiates have sometimes walked away from a negotiation with a different understanding of your counterparty. And that's because you haven't agreed what's agreed. You haven't documented the deal. That only gets you into trouble. So the power balance looks at the needs and worries. Once we make some assumptions of that, that enhances our preparation. And then this compass tells us where we are at a negotiation at any point in time, where we want to go and where we want to be. Sometimes we'll want to drive it forward. That means we're in the propose phase. Sometimes we're going to want to slow it down. We'll explore, asking questions. So it's not linear, it's iterative. Knowing where you are and where you want to go and how you're going to get there is critical in managing and controlling the process. Now, I want to talk about mandate. And what does that mean? Mandate is what your organization, what your manager says a good deal looks like. So your first and last negotiation before any negotiation with a counterparty happens internally. Getting clarity around walkaway positions. What a good deal looks like. Is that actually an exit position? Or is there flexibility there? The clearer your mandate, the more power, the more confidence you'll have at your table. If you don't have a clear mandate, it erodes your confidence, it erodes your control, it erodes your credibility. So prior to your preparation, you need a clear mandate. You need to understand the guiding principles and the strategic objective of the negotiation you're about to enter into. So please, prior to a negotiation, get internal sign-off on objectives and boundaries, have a formal mandate, because it's essential for you to understand what's the sandpit you're playing in, what are the boundaries. So some common errors and some tips on each of the phases. The most common error in preparation is preparing for pushback or resistance rather than preparing for flexibility. I haven't walked you through preparation, but what gives you flexibility is moving from an optimistic entry point, the capability of moving towards your exit and replacing value from what we call a wish list. A wish list is an exercise in creative thinking, not wishful thinking, and it is low cost to your counterparty, but high value to you. So when you make a concession, you can trade back value by getting a wish list item. Top tips: have a clear mandate, prioritize your objectives, and know your exits. An exit is an exit. There isn't any priority if you have 3 exits. They're all exits. If one is more important than the other, one of them shouldn't be there. Explore, not asking questions. The explore phase is all about asking questions and testing your assumptions through those questions. It is essential. Ask one question at a time and listen for the response. So use information to structure the other party's expectations. Tell them what you want, not how badly you want it. Listen to signals of flexibility, e.g., I can't do that. Well, maybe you could do something else. I can't do that now. Could you do it later? Oh, I could pay around about $15,000. Around about $15,000 isn't $15,000. I can't do that in my budget this quarter. Could you do it next quarter? I don't have authority to do that. If you don't, who does? Ask more questions, please. Some questions that you might think about using. What do you want? Why is that important to you? If somebody asks you for something, ask them, why is that important to you? Just suppose I could help you with that. They ask you for 2 things. Of those 2 things, which is most important? They might say, well, they're both important. Just suppose I could only be flexible on one. Which one would you like me to be flexible on? Help me understand why you want this. Help me understand under what circumstances you could be flexible. Help me understand under what circumstances could you accept my proposal. Have I explained that clearly? And so forth and so on. Where could you be least flexible, which gives you an answer on where they could be most flexible. And before you end a meeting, this is my favorite question. Is there anything else you feel I should know that we haven't discussed yet? It's a big open question. It gives the other party permission to disclose things they might not have thought of disclosing before you've asked that. Please be curious. Ask more and better questions. One at a time. Wait for an answer. Propose. Common error, arguing to win. The propose step in negotiation is not about arguing to win. It's about making proposals. Proposals that work for both parties. No, it's the beginning of the negotiation, not the end. Be optimistic in your proposal making, but be realistic. Understand the marketplace and make your proposals, where possible, as close to the other party's exit position as possible. Propose in differential value, and please use the following phrase. If you're prepared to do X, Y, and Z for me, then and only then will I do A, B, and C for you. If you, then I will. Why? They have to hear the bad news before they hear the good news. We call it vegetables before ice cream. Conditions before offers. Typically, we want to be cooperative when we put our offers on the table first. And if the other side's competitive, they'll have that. Thank you very much. No. If you're prepared to do X for me, then and only then will I do this for you. And please learn to love silence. Put a proposal on the table, seek a response, and then allow there to be silence at the table. Wait for their response. People are uncomfortable with silence. You need to learn to be comfortable with silence. Closing, getting greedy at the end. Asking for too much at the end, asking for a big concession will take you back to the explore phase. It won't allow you to close. Missing questions about minor points will not allow you to close. Because if you get a question about a minor point of the negotiation, the other party might be telling you, I've agreed on all the other major issues, and if you can just concede on this minor point, just-in-time delivery, are you saying, if I can deliver it just in time, you'll agree to all the issues we've discussed to this point in time? So listen to questions about minor points. Please do not make a large closing concession. If you do, telling the party that there was more value to be had, and they'll take you back to the explore phase. Always be prepared to trade for last-minute demands and ensure you dot your I's and cross your T's, and you leave the room having agreed what's agreed and how it's going to be implemented. So in closing, we've talked about some principles, process, tactics, and style, all enhancing your skill. The greater your skill, the greater your confidence and the feeling of control you'll have over the process, all leading to better outcomes. How do we want you to respond to demands from the other side? We don't want you just to say yes, because there's a better deal to be had. No, well, that leaves the power with the other party, because I would say to you, under what circumstances would you say yes? Compromising, that's splitting the difference. Neither of you will get what you want. You could argue and argue to win. It's fun, but it won't get you a better outcome. You could postpone, and that delays the outcome. And you would do that only if delaying works for you. But truly, what we want you to do is say, if you're prepared to do X, Y, and Z for me, then and only then can I do this for you. We want you to trade, because that's what negotiation is. Negotiation is about trading in differential value. It's a life skill to be used with family and friends, especially those of you that have young children. Our negotiations with young children at 3, they always win somehow. Colleagues and managers, suppliers, clients, and customers. Learn and apply the process and skills of the negotiation as and where appropriate. And that's all I wanted to say this evening. I've gone on almost for a full hour. I apologize, but I'll stay online if you have questions.
Yeah.
So Mark, it's over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. You don't have to apologize. It was very interesting, and everything was like in good timing. So yeah, just a moment. Let me share.
So if you want me to get up the chat so I can see the questions, or will you tell me them?
No, I'll forward them to you as I speak, because we've got
Okay,
a few questions already. So
great.
I'll just say in Hebrew once again, and in English, if anybody has any question, you are more welcome to leave it just behind, just under the live video. You can still do it now, but please do it quickly. חברים, אם למישהו יש שאלה למרק, אתם מאוד מאוד מוזמנים, אבל ממש תעשו את זה עכשיו, לפני שאני אסיים את השידור, בבקשה להשאיר אותה כתגובה.
בבקשה,
מתחת
שאלות.
בבקשה שאלות עכשיו, כן. Yes, all right. So I'm going to ask you, okay, so the first question we just got is, as academics, often we are in well-defined structures and policies, we live by them. How can we open the door for negotiation when dealing with very conservative entities such as universities, granting bodies, governmental bodies, etc.? What do you say?
What a great question. And I ran a course for a university procurement group last week. And typically, academics, and if somebody on the line's an academic, please forgive me, I don't mean any offense. They have an objective, which is money for research. And the university becomes this institution that offers extraordinary value, but their interest is very narrow. And what they tend to do is give away that value without getting anything in return other than their slice, which enables them to go on and do research. So the cost, if you can show, to come back to the question, if you can demonstrate the cost of not negotiating better outcomes and understanding the value of the image capital of the institution, of the different component parts of the university and what it brings to the marketplace, what it brings to cooperation with a large corporate institution like an ExxonMobil, like AT&T, like Apple. You bring enormous cachet to those institutions, to those corporate industries. And you have to understand that and help people understand that by not negotiating, they are suboptimizing the value they can derive from the parties you're negotiating with on the institution's behalf. I hope that sort of helps you with the question. And if I haven't responded, I'm happy to try again.
Yeah, I think that was an interesting method to approach it. And we have another question actually that is like related to working in academia. So the next question is, in academia, often the people are introverted and not extroverted. So how do we learn to actually negotiate, learn the needs of the other party, etc., when they are pretty close by definition? What would you say?
Okay, so, and I'd like you to have these conversations also with Yoni, who is also acting on behalf of a major faculty engineering at Monash University, because he faces these dilemmas as you do. So, and he's worked through some of them. Introverted people don't do well with feeling pushed. They're often analytical in the way they look at the world. So you're going to have to provide them data which they can get their heads around to demonstrate to them that with the data you're providing them, there are sources to gain better outcomes through negotiations. So we all look at the world through a different lens. I'm a psychologist. The lens I look through is different than an engineer's lens or a researcher's lens. I teach negotiation. I like people. So it's easy for me to engage. I'm very tired at the end because I have a shy side. It's hard to believe after this presentation, isn't it? But I do, and I'm tired at the end. So finding the lens that the party you're trying to engage with looks at the world through and speaking their language will help you join them to take them on the journey that you want them to accompany you on. You have to be with, you have to enter the space that the person you want to engage with is at a moment in time. That means sharing the lens they look at the world through, the language they speak or understand. And then once you're able to do that, you're able to take them on the journey you want to take them on. But if you only look at the world through your lens, it's almost impossible to engage with them because it's as if you're speaking a foreign language and they retreat into their shell and they're not listening or hearing you.
Yeah.
I hope I've helped with that question.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, if people want to like leave us a follow-up question, that is also, of course, possible. But otherwise, we shall commence to the next one. So another question, again, of course, it's more of a talk aimed at scientists and academics. So
Of course.
usually as scientists, we are curious about physical phenomena and scientific unknowns and such. And sometimes we're less curious on people and their needs. So do you have any suggestion how we can encourage an open, curious conversation about people and their needs, you know, in an environment where usually we're used to talk about science, etc.? And thanks.
Yes, okay. It's a great question because it's stepping into your unknown. It's leaning into your own personal discomfort. I don't want you to jump in at the deep end. What I want to encourage you to do is lean into your discomfort, which is the dynamic of the human phenomena, the complexity of the human phenomena. What makes people's socks go up and down? Be curious about them. What is this person's needs and worries? You might start off with talking about what they're engaged with and slowly develop a dialogue that leads to trust. You must have a trusting relationship with those you engage in. Trust is the basis of every good relationship, whether it be professional or personal. So a trusting relationship develops from you being interested in their world, in their needs and worries, taking an interest in it and working with it and molding it like you would with clay, a physical thing, molding, shaping, using words that resonate with them, using concepts and metaphors that resonate with them. Think about the narrative to engage with them. Great negotiators are great storytellers. Find a way to have a story that takes them on a journey. So start once again at the place where you find them, and then find a story that takes them along a journey. But first and foremost, you need to be interested in their world.
Yeah, I guess so. We're talking about like human relations after all. So
Oh, we are.
yeah, you gotta be.
Negotiation is a human endeavor.
Yeah, yeah. So which actually leads me to the next question, which is maybe more generally phrased. But somebody just left us a question, and he wrote, "Mark, some people are naturally gifted at negotiation. What do you think is the secret of a natural negotiator?" I mean, I think you've
Yes, I think it's a great question. I think it's a great question. Let me tell you the good news first. Negotiation is a skill that can be learned. And yes, some people are gifted. Those people that are gifted are curious. Those people that are gifted listen, think, aren't just trying to win. They're trying to trade people and understand that if I trade people what they want, it's much more likely that they'll trade me what I want. If I deny them what they want, why would they trade me what I want? So the gifted negotiators aren't competitive. We know people that are competitive and get great deals. However, you think about it. If you're very competitive with someone and only trying to win, how likely will it be that they'll disclose to you all their areas of flexibility and what's possible? Or will they close down and only disclose what they think is necessary? The more open you are, the more curious you are, the more cooperative you are, the more likely it will be that you'll get a reciprocal response, opening up the range of possibilities and options to actually grow the pie for mutual gain. So those are the attributes of great negotiators.
Yeah, once again.
Oh, and by the way,
yeah,
slowing your negotiation down to the pace that works for you. Slow it down. Say something, pause, rest, listen. A bit more, pause, listen, relaxed. So think about the rhythm of the negotiation. Think about your own rhythm, not rushing. I worked with somebody this week who was rushing. He was very bright, very commercial, but he missed the nuance of signals of flexibility because he rushed down the road and was rushing for closure. There were better deals to be done had he just slowed the game.
Yeah, I think some people, maybe they imagine the negotiation scene to be like in a movie or something, so they can't take it like
Yes,
slow.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
They want to be witty on the spot and like smart on the spot. Yeah, let me check if we have any other questions coming up. Well, I believe that's about it for today. For tonight, sorry, I forgot. It's night.
It's tonight for me.
Yeah.
Ronnie, I want to thank you very much. And for those of you that were online and participated, although silently, I want to thank you for your time, for your patience. I hope that there was added value. I hope you've taken away possibly one or two things that will be useful for you. My contact is up on the board. You're more than welcome to contact me by email. You're more than welcome to contact negotiation partners. It was my pleasure to speak tonight. I can only hope that I was able to add some value in your consideration of how you might think about negotiation going forward. So, toda rabah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
בבקשה רבה, בשמחה, we say בשמחה. Yeah. So as Mark just said, we thank you all for joining us today or tonight, wherever you are. And I'm mentioning once again, this webinar was recorded, but please do note that it won't be online for long. So please, if you have missed any parts, if you were like live but not from the beginning, then please do watch it now, watch it in this weekend before we take it down. And Mark, thank you so much for being us with here tonight.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time and efforts. And I want to tell you all, to all of our audience once again, you can access the link to all of the information on our website, so you can sign up and join our community activities around the world. And other than that, you are going to get another email from us with a feedback form following the end of this live. So please, if you can give it just a moment, we would appreciate your feedback very much. תודה רבה לכולם. אנחנו הולכים לשלוח משוב קצר, אני אשאיר אותו גם כאן מתחת לוידאו. תודה שהייתם איתנו, אנחנו יודעים שהשעה קצת מאתגרת לחלק מהמיקומים שלנו, לחלק מהקהל הקבוע שלנו. אנחנו מאוד מקווים שלפחות תראו את זה בשידור חוזר, בגלל שזה וובינר לדעתי מאוד מאוד אינפורמטיבי, מאוד מאוד חשוב להרבה אנשים. So thank you once again, and we will finish our live here. Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure.
להתראות.
להתראות.
It was my pleasure. להתראות. Bye.
Bye bye.